Hey folks, welcome to a podcast about Catholic things. This is your ambassador of common sense, Eric, and I'm here with...
I'm Dan, your ambassador of nonsense. Hi, everybody.
And I guess you got... Apparently, we've got a difference of opinion on what the beer of the week is.
That's okay. The beer of the week, we'll do this week, the beer of the week is Lagunitas Hop Stupid. Lagunitas was a beer company started in 1993, and recently, a couple years ago, more than a couple years ago, in 2015, it was kind of bought by Heineken. Not fully, but Heineken bought a majority interest in it. At that point, it stopped being a true craft brewery, but they still make pretty good beers. So this one is Hop Stupid, which is a kind of fairly hopped up and malted up beer. It's a heavy beer, weighing it at 8% alcohol by volume.
Doesn't look heavy.
Yeah, it's not dark, but it's,
you know what?
It's got what?
I wonder if I left it out in the heat too long. Lift your
Why?
bottle up to the light and look at the bottom.
All right, hold on just a minute. Oh, do you see? Hold on just a minute. Let me.
Gunk.
Is it white?
Mm-hmm. Just looks cloudy.
Okay. So I'm holding up to the light. Yeah, there's what appear to be floaties in there. Let me.
Looks like backwash almost. Somebody drank from this bottle before they capped it.
All right, so I typed in.
Okay.
Let's find out what that actually is. I typed in Hop Stupid and hit space, and what Google came up as the next word that I was likely to type is floaties.
Ah. They do it on purpose.
Okay, that's right. Blah, blah, blah. A minute.
Hey, we got some bad beer.
I wonder if you're supposed to, because this is you say the bottom. Well, I guess it's concentrating at the bottom. It's kind of sort of settling down.
Yeah.
But I didn't pay any attention to it.
When I took a drink, a lot of it got stirred up.
Oh, yeah, so there's somebody complaining about the same thing. Okay, so online, the consensus seems to be that it's pretty common. It's just yeast and hops bits.
My beer has a yeast infection.
Your beer has a yeast infection. That's right. Okay, but everybody says it's still drinkable, though.
Still drinkable. Okay. Are you going to drink the whole thing? Are you going to drink the floaties?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, what can I do? I'm not gonna sit and wait for them to settle down before drinking.
Calm down, boys. Go to the bottom of the bottle where you belong.
That's right.
All right.
Okay, so
that's the brew.
The beer of the week is one with floaties.
Okay, I'll link to it, and I might also link to some of the explanations about the floaties.
Yeah, see if you can find some. That's so some that I were just kind of indicated that Lagunitas seems to have a lot of that.
Ah,
I never noticed that.
Okay, I noticed those kinds of things.
Yeah, well, one should.
Well, no, I was just looking up. I was lifting it to the light to see because you said heavy, and I'm thinking dark.
Oh, okay,
so I'm
right.
Looking at it in the light, and I'm like, "Hey, what the heck is that?"
It doesn't look very heavy. Yeah.
All right. Well, this I don't even know. I should have looked at the dates, but the going on in the church right now is the Synod of Bishops for the Pan-Amazon region, and
that's right now. It's happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
a synod for Pan-Amazon. Now, I assume that this isn't to address the needs of Catholic evangelization within the Pan-Amazon region.
Well, see, you would think that's what it should be for, but
sure.
I mean,
But this is the reign of Pope Francis.
Yeah. And then I'm looking at their website, and in Amazonia, New Paths for the Church and for an Integral Ecology.
An integral ecology.
I don't even know what that means. Discernment towards a pastoral and ecological conversion. I guess the church needs to be converted now. We got to convert the church to match these indigenous people's way of life, where they
is that what they're doing? Trying to preserve indigenous ways of life?
I think so. And the thing is, I thought because they put a preparatory document for the synod on the Pan-Amazon region. They released this, and I thought I should read this whole thing, but we were running out of time. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll skim through it. But I kind of skimmed through the first part, and I know that I don't need to read anything else. It's just ridiculous.
Sometimes it's like, okay,
I know what this is. This is just
exactly
goofy crap. Here's the thing. We were going to do one on environmentalism anyway, before I even heard the thing was going on. And
now we got something to talk about.
Because we did one on animal rights, and maybe it was different than people thought it would be. It's how we've stated how both of us kind of feel towards animals, as far as whether or not we should worry about whether or not they're in pain, things like that. But environmentalism is a big thing right now, and the problem is that the most of environmentalism revolves around the fact that we should not be having babies.
Oh yeah, it's most environmentalism is it when you like kind of start digging at it and realize what's going on. What it really is anti-humanism. Yeah. It's an ism set up against humans. Anti-humanism. That's what it is.
Right. And obviously that's not a Catholic thing. We can't no. We can't subscribe to that in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
But the way it's often presented, before you get really knee deep into the philosophy, it sounds like a good thing. You go, you visit the parks.
Sounds reasonable.
And you see the trees and the hills and the wonders, and you think, we need to preserve this. And so that's how you approach it. And, at the same time, look, we can look at places like South America or Africa, and we can look at the ecology there, and we can see certain things that have been preserved. And you watch the nature shows, and it's like, we definitely need to preserve this. But instead of looking at that, I'd rather look at it from a historical standpoint and look at the Americas, because the Americas is an entire, well, not just the Americas, the United States of America is an entirely different. The same thing was going on here that was going on there, and we treated it a certain way, and I submit that it was the correct way to deal with this stuff. And I guess almost the correct way. We got a couple things here, and part of this synod that's going on is talking about the way of life of the indigenous peoples who do not know Christ and who have every right to know Christ, and who we should not be denying their right of salvation. We need to tell them who Jesus was and why he was here. And that involves a change of lifestyle. You don't meet Christ and not change.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Christianity has always been about conversion, not merely some kind of transfer of intellectual knowledge or something like that.
Right, and I mean, we can look at the American Indians and kind of draw some parallels here. The indigenous people of North America had a certain way of doing things, had a certain way of life. I don't care how you cut it, that way was going to end. because of the colonists who came here.
Yeah.
We saw these lands that we could conquer and use, and we were going to do it. Now, you might say something like, what if each state had been one nation instead of a state of nations? And what if each of those nations had a different approach to this entire matter? I think things still would have ended up the way they are, as in most of the buffalo are killed off. I'm not saying we should have killed off all the buffalo, but the buffalo covered so much of the land, and they're wild animals, and we wanted to use that land. And if they were as numerous now as they were back then, I mean, can you imagine getting up in the morning, looking out your backyard, seeing a buffalo?
It would be even more than, for example, white-tailed deer.
Yeah, because we have white-tailed deer going through my backyard now. There's some small, very, very, like, less than half an acre of wooded area, and there's like 5 of them back there sometimes. Can you imagine if those were buffalo? Because you hear stories about deer attacking people, but buffalo are, they're bigger than cows. Can you imagine one of those things running into you? And I don't know. It wouldn't have worked. I'm not saying we should have destroyed them the way we did, but we did have to bring those numbers way down if we were going to use the land the way we wanted to.
Yeah, it was necessarily going to happen. I mean, when you take land and put it to human, what I'm going to say, civilized use, and civilized is a good thing when I say it, not a bad thing. You have to trim certain things. You have to trim, flora. You've got to cut down trees and make room to build the houses and yards and roads and stuff like that. Well, sometimes you have to trim fauna too, and you have to get rid of some of the animals in the area in order to be able to make use of the land. Doesn't mean that you should do it universally for all the land and just get rid of all the animals. That's not what we're saying. But yeah, some trimming has to be has to be done.
Right.
And it should be, we shouldn't feel like that's always a bad thing.
Well, you look at places like in Africa, you've got the migrating wildebeests. Now, say they were going to tame parts of Africa. The wildebeests migrate because they're following the fresh grass. They follow the rain.
Right.
If you were going to tame this land, one of the things you would do is make it so that it's not desert for most of the year. And we can do that. I mean, we could make lakes. We can trap water so that it can be used all year long. We do it here in America, parts of, all through the states. If you have that huge number of wildebeest, there's no reason for them to migrate anymore because the land has been tamed to where it's not desert for most of the time. But if you've got that many of them, they kill the land. So the idea is you got to trim them down, and then those ones that are left over can stay wild, and they can stay in one place, and they don't have to migrate. It does change things, but it doesn't eliminate the structure that God had set up. He had set up this structure so that the land could remain alive until it is civilized or inhabited by humans. I always think of that being the plan here. America was set up a certain way so that everything on it would live and continue living until it was civilized. The environmentalists come up with these ideas that we should not touch the land at all because they point to certain things like if you eliminate, say, this one animal or eliminate this one plant, then this part goes out of control, this part goes out of control, and eventually you end up with a desert in places where you didn't have desert. For example, if you start cutting down trees in the Amazon. But if you go further than just cutting down trees, if you tame the land, then it doesn't happen that way. And we can come up with...
we don't just cut down trees for the purpose of having the trees gone.
Right, we're using them.
When we make use of land, part of the use of the land always involves turning the land's purpose to, okay, some of it's going to be so that we can build, maybe houses and roads and stuff, but often it's when we're making use of the land, we turn it to purposes of growth.
Right.
You could say ecological purposes if you consider the ecology that which supports our animal needs for food and that kind of stuff.
So we're going to grow food there for us, or food there for the animals.
Yeah, I mean,
or more trees.
Whatever there is, we grow crops or something.
Yeah, like we
okay,
plant
I
trees
agree.
now.
Maybe there are some species of animals that might not benefit from the change in, that we bring about to a certain area or whatever.
There might be a couple that die off, but
there might be some that die. There might, it's kind of funny. Plants and animals alike have kind of shown a strange resiliency. A lot of the animals that sort of really need to be there anyway, they tend to adapt.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. I mean, okay, we tend to look at species and we think in terms of every species. I say we, I mean modern people.
Yeah. Has
to be preserved, as though there's some kind of, I don't know, universal plan that includes that particular species. I don't know that we necessarily have to even look at things that way.
Right. If you're going to go at it from a purely, if you're not even looking at the plans of God, if you don't even believe in God and you're going to say this is all part of evolution, then why would we preserve any species?
Yeah, why bother?
I mean,
that's,
this species evolved specifically in reaction to the conditions around it. If we're going to make those conditions change, then it would follow that whatever's there is going to evolve or be gone, which is
be replaced by something.
Ultimate plan of nature, if you follow that line of thought. If you don't, then it was a creation of God to keep that land healthy until there were enough of us to move in there and take care of it the way we would.
Right.
And if, in places like in California where they're trying to go by this plan where we want the land to be as though man never was here.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that because of the migration of animals. It's impossible now. So what ends up happening is the land suffers, and you have these giant forest fires that never seem to get put out, and then it also encroaches on the into the cities and destroys that land as well. It destroys everything because they won't take care of the land that they are in charge of.
Yeah, yeah.
I hate to use one of the pop terms that are always floating around there, but stewardship, good stewardship of the land.
That's right.
Stewardship means not just not touching it. It means taking care of it.
Yeah, stewardship implies that you're exercising a level of control.
And that we're going to use it.
That you're governing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and use of it. It's not just kind of a hands off. The steward that's left in charge of the palace while the king is gone.
Yeah,
he's not supposed to just kind of sit off in the distance and yep, the palace is still going.
Yeah,
he's supposed to make use of it and govern it and control it and so forth. Yeah.
Well, hey,
and if the church,
even the steward who was in charge of 100 talents or whatever it was,
what
didn't do anything.
He buried it.
Yeah, and he was punished for that.
That's right. That's right.
We have to make use of the land and let it benefit us as well as the natural parts of the land that were already there. And if that means confining a species to, say, one area because they no longer need to migrate, well, let's do that. Which is what eventually happened with the buffalo. They're no longer roaming across the U.S. I don't know if buffalo were ever migratory anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. Should we clarify that what we're calling buffalo
American bison.
are actually American bison, is not true buffalo?
Well, I still call them buffalo.
Yeah.
I think everybody knows what that is.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You know what? It took a lot less time for me to say that than I thought it would.
Well, that's a good point. That, but one of the things, it's kind of interesting that, because we started out talking about how people want to use environmentalism ultimately as a kind of anti-humanism, and basically they want to say, stop making new people, stop living, what they want to do. Okay, so you look at normal, look at nature. It's kind of almost a weird, ironic schizophrenia on their part. So you look at nature and what happens in nature. Every single life form out there, every plant, every animal, does whatever it does, whatever it's set up to do, however it's set up to reproduce or whatever, and it keeps going and keeps going. It wants to grow and to flourish and thrive, and given a few environmental factors like some water and that kind of stuff, I mean, it's like so many parts of the world are just thick with life. It's just it keeps going. And so there's people who, okay, on the one hand, they want to point to nature as they want to make some kind of god out of nature. And then they want to turn to us and say, we shouldn't imitate that. We shouldn't thrive.
We should limit ourselves somehow.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
This, like almost every part of liberalism, it always seems to come back to abortion.
Yeah. Because
that's the big excuse for the ultimate liberal, is that there's just too many of us and we should be able to have sex but still not have children. But you can get back to your point. I just wanted to point that out because it always ends up at abortion.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that kind of was the end of my point, and yeah, that was the right follow-on to it. And it's some of it is, I think, a real, I don't know. I think that there's a sort of diabolical hatred of the human race, ironically, that some people have. It's like they hate their own race. It's like in America, You've got people who hate America. Living in America, they use all the benefits that America gives them in order to spout hate for America. Well, I think there's people who are that way about the human race.
Yeah.
And then there's other people who maybe aren't quite at that level, but for some reason, in some way, they think that somehow the earth isn't going to be, I don't know, capable of providing for people. Like somehow, if we don't, if we keep, growing as a population, we're going to just somehow strip the earth bare, like the earth, like plants aren't going to be able to keep reproducing more plants, and animals aren't going to keep reproducing more animals, and then we'll be the only thing left, and then we'll all starve and die or something. I don't know. It's really hard to envision what they think, but they seem to think something along those lines.
Yeah, it's always apocalyptic. Like it's everything's going to end if we don't stop farming, and some of the stuff is just really stupid.
Yeah,
I look at it and I think, how can you think that? But for some reason,
you really gotta wonder.
It's attractive to some people, and I'm not sure why. That whole ideology is it draw, especially millennials right now. I mean, they really believe we're destroying the planet every time we do something on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like, hey, you know what? We're doing what we do. We're following our nature. We're rational beings. We think about things, and then and we're also transformational beings. It's part of our nature to take what's there and then to change it to suit us.
Right.
There's something about that. God built that into us. He wants us to do that. Now, that impulse, since the fall, can go in a lot of wrong directions. So we have to give good consideration to what we're doing and our motives and stuff. I don't want to say that everything, just because we're inclined to do it is necessarily good, but it's clearly built into our natures to want to, take what's out there and transform it to our needs, to change it into something that serves us somehow. And we shouldn't, we shouldn't feel like there's something wrong with doing that either.
Now, there are certain situations, for example, here in the U.S., we saw these giant plains that were covered with grass, and that's where the buffalo were. And we're like, well, let's take all that and farm it. So we just covered that whole area with farmland. That, to a lot of people, and I don't know how much of it is true and how much of it isn't, that is what created the Dust Bowl. Quote, over-farming the land and drying it out with plants that were not meant to be on there.
Oh, right.
I don't know if you've seen that. There's a Ken Burns documentary called The Dust Bowl, I think, that talks about all of those events from beginning to end. How it started as a drought, and the drought just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And it was because of farming that some people say it happened. Now, it was also because of farming that it ended. If you subscribe to that idea that we caused the drought that was the Dust Bowl, then it also follows that we ended it. When at first we were farming, we were digging up just the very top of the land, putting seeds in the very top. And then after 10 years of drought and these giant dust storms and nobody having any money or any way to make food, we started digging further down into the earth so that the dust was mixed down further and the soil down lower was brought up to the top. And supposedly that is part of what the solution was. And we did end a drought in the breadbasket of America.
Oh, right. Yeah. I didn't realize that history.
Oh, yeah, you should watch it. It's a pretty good documentary. I like all of Ken Burns' documentaries, but this one's pretty good.
Okay.
It might be on Netflix. I don't know. Because a lot of people have canceled Netflix.
But that's a good example of what I was saying, right? About how sometimes we need to change things a little. I mean, in its most basic, you go and kill an animal. Nobody goes and kills an animal and eats it right away, right?
Right. Usually.
We build a fire and cook it first.
At least.
Yeah, usually. Yeah. And a lot of times we mix it with plants and put spices with it and stuff like that, too.
Make all kinds of wonderful things.
And it tastes really good when we do that.
So one of the other points to this is that the dryness was kind of it was a cycle, because the dryness caused these dust storms, which made the dryness worse, and the lack of crops made it worse because the crops kept dying and they couldn't bring life back to the land. Now, since then, we've discovered these giant pools of water underneath the land that we can tap into and use. Now, the end of this Ken Burns document is that eventually that's going to run out, and then we're going to be facing the same problem.
Oh,
I would submit that maybe, it's not.
Maybe not, because, well, first of all, we need to understand the movement, under the earth of where's the water coming from, how's it getting there, and so forth. I don't think there's just like these isolated pools of water.
Right.
But the other thing is, as you grow and use the land and produce, you change the environment above it too.
Right. and you react to certain things. I mean, we reacted to the drought, not by just picking up and leaving. We weren't going to do that,
right.
And we're not going to do that now. And if we somehow deplete that giant source of water, the next step will be, how do we replace it? Or how do we come up with something different so that we still have water? That's why
we're problem solvers.
We build dams, and we find all kinds of ingenious ways of using water. Maybe someday we'll eventually figure out a way to cheaply convert salt water into drinking water. I mean, it's what we do.
Yeah. Cheap distilling or something like that.
Yeah. So that's really all I've got to say on the subject.
Well, I'm going to invoke a something. It's rare anymore that I would do this, but I'm going to evoke something that I read recently from Pope Francis in his sermon.
Yeah.
The reading is the loaves and fishes. Of course, kind of foretells the doctrine of the body of Christ and the real presence of the Eucharist, and that Christ is himself fully present in every fractional particle of the host everywhere. When we receive Holy Communion, we receive the entire person of Christ, not just a foot or an arm or something like that. And so the reading for the Feast of Corpus Christi is the loaves and fishes multiplication, where Jesus fed 5,000. And Pope Francis was kind of interesting. I don't know if he really realizes what he did, because Pope Francis seems to be sort of jumping on the bandwagon of this environmentalism stuff.
Right.
But he pointed out Jesus didn't take the 5 loaves and 2 fishes and turn it into 5,000 and then say, okay, now go distribute this. He just took the loaves and fishes that were there and said, okay, now start breaking off pieces and giving it to people. And as they broke off pieces, it just never ran out. Jesus just kind of trusted in the Father's providence that he was going to provide. That you don't, and they didn't have to send all the people away either. Well, let's apply this. Okay, now a lot of what is, reasonable, concern for conservation of environment, which is different than the preservation that we've been kind of saying is inappropriate. Mm-hmm. But conservation is just making sure that it continues to be there for us to use. But it implies that we're using it.
Right.
Well, part of conservation is science, and there has to be some science behind that. But at the same time, God put us here on this earth. We know as Catholics from faith that the reason this earth exists is for us. God created the entire universe, the entire physical world, in order so that he could create us and put us in it so that we could then, enter into heaven and be with him. And, he may have plans for us after that. We don't know what that's going to look like. But we know that this world was created for us. We are God's reason for physical creation. Now, given that, and then God tells us, be fruitful and multiply. And God teaches us that, hey, there's certain things you're not allowed to engage in sex and purposely prevent pregnancy. You're not allowed to just go kill each other in order to make room for things, stuff like that. Well, if we take Pope Francis' approach, realize that, hey, this lesson of the loaves and fishes, in addition to its lesson about Corpus Christi and the body of Christ, is this lesson of trust in God's providence, that we don't have to see that the whole thing is there all up front. We can do what God instructed us to do and trust that he's going to provide. And that means filling the earth.
Certainly. And
trusting that the way God created this earth, it's going to work. It's going to provide. It's going to be there for us. That's something that I would take from Pope Francis's sermon about the loaves and fishes.
Instead of
I don't think he meant that, because he's
No, he didn't.
busy with this Amazonian synod in the meantime.
Instead of looking at, well, let's see, statistics say blah, 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 and in 20 years, there won't be enough room. I mean, you can plan ahead to make the Earth produce more than it is right now, or even just do that because you want to produce more because you want to make more money, which is what the free market would do naturally. Or sit there and fret about it and worry and say, oh my gosh, we got to limit the number of people. And it's, it seems like the more people do that, the worse off those areas are. I
mean, we have certainly, I say we, I mean, modern man has certainly made some missteps when it comes to stewardship, when it comes to conservation and setting things up to keep providing for us and stuff like that. I don't think anybody's going to deny that, but for the most part, things are better when we're involved.
Right. And I would point to America. We've covered this entire continent, and we definitely changed some things. We go once a year. We go down to a place in Kentucky called Red River Gorge, and we hike through the trails, and it's a really amazing place. And it would be a shame to lose something like that. So I'm all for making that a park and setting it aside and say this is the place we're gonna keep natural as well as we can. However, it wouldn't be as nice of a place if it was full of black bears. Mm-hmm. It just wouldn't be as good because you'd have to worry about getting eaten. And at the same time, there were other areas just as nice as Red River Gorge that are now Lake Cumberland, which has its own ecology and its own animals living there, and it's completely different. And we dammed it and filled it with water, and it still provides recreation for us. It also provides power now.
Yeah.
And a fresh supply of water for drought times.
That's right. I mean, think about how many reservoir lakes have been created by just the simple act of damming for the purpose of creating reservoir lakes. And
they're teeming with life.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not the same life that was there before.
Right.
But they're all hotbeds of biological activity. So
don't be afraid to cut down a tree.
Yeah. Especially if you're going to make something out of it.
Yeah.
But even if you just need it for fire.
A chair, a table, a fire.
Right.
They grow back.
Yep.
Yep. Even if it's not the one that takes 2,000 years to grow. And it is nice to hold on to some of those trees. But if those trees were suddenly gone, that's not the end of the world. It's not that big a deal. We can make other trees, or we can plant other trees. And they grow, and they do some of the same jobs. Might change a few things, but America's still great, even though a lot of that original ecology is gone. That is the correct approach to nature, I think, and the environment, and when it comes to the people, in a lot of these primitive lands, there are people who have lost touch with civilization maybe 5,000 years ago and have become more like animals than humans.
They've kind of become slaves of the environment,
right?
In a way.
And it's,
I mean, we all depend on the environment. Yeah, we depend on the air and the water and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's, we're not supposed to be slaves to it in the sense that we can't modify it to suit us.
Yeah. And look, the lifestyles of these tribes, it's not better than it would be if they were civilized. Now,
Yeah.
you can point to a really overcrowded city and point to the mismanagement of it and say, really, you want them to go to that? Like if we could point to Chicago and say, oh, we're going to put them in a place like Chicago. Is that better for them?
Well, actually, Chicago, I wouldn't even. I would have no heartburn about putting them in Chicago. I mean, through the course of generations, I'm thinking like Beijing.
Okay.
Or something like that. But first of all, I don't think anybody's talking about that. I don't think we're talking about going into these Amazon forests and plopping down a major metropolitan city and saying, okay, everybody's got to become urbanized now. That's
well, it's one of those things where like the American Indians. The American Indians, they would plant corn, and they were doing that when we got here, and they would harvest that corn.
I didn't realize only certain tribes, though, right? Some of the tribes were more savage than others.
Right, that's true. Some of them simply lived by going from one tribe to the next and stealing everything. But
seriously?
There were certain... I don't even know if you would call them tribes, because it wasn't like a whole race. It would be, I guess you would say bands. Yeah.
Yeah. A clan, maybe.
But they did farm. What they wouldn't do, what they refused to do, was to raise animals.
Oh, no kidding.
That's a lot of them. That was their big problem. We're not going to pen up this animal and grow it just for meat. Instead, we have to hunt it. Now
they would go on a hunt,
right,
and bring it back for the tribe. I don't even see that as necessarily I don't know, a bad thing for primitive people as a way of life. You know what I mean?
But if civilized people are going to live close by, they cannot do it that way anymore, because the animal population goes down. It changes.
That's right.
American Indians could not live in America today because
as their original right.
Right.
Okay.
They could
not.
What you're saying. It's just when we got to Kentucky, it was you couldn't walk, say, the length of a football field without seeing a whole herd of white-tailed deer.
Mm-hmm.
That's how populated it was with wildlife.
So in the spring or the fall, whenever it was that they decided it was time to go on the hunt, they knew there were going to be animals. They would go on the hunt, get enough meat for the year for their tribe, if they did it that way. I don't know.
It was basically, like in the Ohio Valley, the Shawnee lived here, and there were different tribes all around the Kentucky area, but Kentucky, they considered that sacred ground, and there was an agreement between all the tribes not to live in Kentucky. It would only be used by all of them as a hunting ground because it was so
that's
plentiful.
Interesting. So now when we think Kentucky, we're thinking in terms of drawn state borders,
right?
Erase the borders, and what's the area? Are you talking roughly like Daniel Boone National Forest?
From there on up to the Ohio River. The Ohio River was always and they called it the
kind
Kentucky
of a dividing
lands.
line, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
So everything south of the Ohio River in this Ohio
that was their
Valley.
Sacred hunting ground. So the tribes didn't live there, but all the tribes could hunt there.
Right. And then white man moves in. See, we couldn't go in Ohio unless you wanted to go to war with the Shawnee. So
we had to settle in Kentucky. And
right. We settled in Kentucky, and what happened right away, they would come down to go hunting, and it's like, what the heck happened to all the deer? There's no deer. So
okay, yeah.
You're
right. I mean, moving in changes things.
Yeah. If you take into account things like that, these people in the Amazons, if we're going to civilize these areas, they cannot live the way they used to live. It has to change.
But you know what? Going in and saying, okay, we're going to civilize them, and we're gonna plant civilization in those areas. First of all, okay, we've already talked about, that's not a bad thing. They deserve. Right. If civilization also means the possibility of bringing the gospel to them, they deserve that.
Right.
Second of all, I think it's a lot better to do that than to do what, and I don't know whether this is a real thing or just kind of like a mythos that environmentalists have kind of cooked up. But the common perception is, for example, we go in, we cut down all the trees, and then we leave.
Yeah.
And we leave this kind of raped, barren land kind of a thing. Obviously, planting a civilization there where there's people thriving is far superior to just scraping everything off the land and then leaving and heading out.
Right.
And I mean far superior for the sake of the natives that were living there to begin with.
You know, and you could also consider the fact that let's say you've got this Amazonian basin or something, this giant area they've decided, all right, all the nations have decided to leave that area alone.
Yeah.
And not civilize it. Okay, now you've got this giant
kind of like
land.
a worldwide aspect, a worldwide concept of a national park.
Right. So the governments are not going to go there. They're not going to do anything with this land. And they're going to leave the people who live there now to stay there.
All right. Okay, I didn't realize you meant that aspect. Okay, but okay. So
let's say that happens. Now, the fact is, you're just talking about governments now, but nations are made of people, and there's still going to be people, and there's going to be a lot of bad people that go into those areas. Now these people have no protection against evildoers.
Exactly. So what you've done is you've set up a free haven for people who want to go in and exploit the natives.
And you've got, not to that extreme, but you've got something of the same situation right now here in North America with these reservations. A lot of them are being exploited.
Sometimes by outsiders, often by the tribal leaders, as I understand it. They set up these casinos and stuff, and it's on behalf of their tribe. But it's like, okay, we'll take 90% of it, and we'll live well, and then the other 10% can be distributed to everybody else.
Right. So, not civilizing the area and taming the area is much worse because you're not going to be able to keep people out entirely. There's still going to be people going in there, and it just, the whole argument just kind of crumbles, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it sounds like that's what the argument is going to be from Pope Francis and his synod.
And it's unfortunate, you know, I don't know. This Pope he's just. I mean, we've already got a couple of instances of what you know is just outright heresy from this Pope. We've got the whole death penalty thing. We've got the multiplicity of religions thing. It sounds like this Pope is buying into the heresy of. I consider it to be the heresy of the social gospel, and here's what I mean by calling it a heresy. So. It's kind of related, I think, to what people call liberation theology, and it might be exactly the same thing as what people call liberation theology. But I've kind of noticed this among certain groups of Catholics. There's kind of this. So we the gospel itself, the real gospel from Jesus, is, hey, the Father loves you. And you sinned against him, and I've given you a path back so that you can be saved and return to union with him. That's the gospel.
Yeah.
That's the center of everything. Everything else, you know, matters in as much as it matters to that.
Right.
Now, so, you know, we go through the world and we've got the generations on generations. Well, of course, God wants as many people as possible to experience his love. So of course he wants us to keep being fruitful and have lots of generations through the world, and hopefully, you know, we've got many millennia ahead to come for the world to create more people to be with God. But that's what it's about. It's about being with God. Well, there's a certain contingent of Catholic thinkers that seems to think that solving the problems of human suffering here on earth, the social problems like poverty and so forth, and even evils that one that people visit on another, like slavery and stuff.
Yeah.
Solving those problems is what the gospel is about. That, Jesus said, feed the poor. And God throughout the Old Testament has said, give quarter to the alien and the widow and so on and so forth. But it's because God cares about them and wants them, the alien, the widow, the child, the innocent, the vulnerable, and so forth. He wants them to be able to come to a place where they can be with Him. So all of those other things have to be oriented towards, if we're to be true Christians, oriented towards this concept of salvation, this idea of union with God.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. And there seems to be this sort of concept running within Catholic circles that the feeding of the poor is what it's about all by itself. Not just feeding the poor as in these individual people, but eliminating poverty.
Yeah.
Or eliminating this social evil or that social evil. And so we have this thing where people are talking about the social gospel, and I'm putting kind of scare quotes around that. I think the idea of the social gospel, the very proposition that the gospel is a social thing as opposed to a eschatological thing. I don't even know if I'm saying, I always say eschatological. But anyway, that the gospel is about society and not about our salvation, about God, about, our ultimate destination. I think that's a heresy of the modern world. Maybe it's part of the heresy of modernism. I don't know. I haven't analyzed it that far, but I think that's a heresy. And I think a lot of Catholic attention to and kowtowing to environmentalism simply plays on that same heresy, except it removes it even one more step. Now it's not about people, it's about the world. And it's like, wait a minute, we're supposed to be about the salvation of souls. That's our goal here. Bringing souls to Christ and raising souls to be brought to Christ. And if what we're doing doesn't serve that, then it's kind of meaningless. Even if what we're doing, obviously what we're doing can serve it by indirection and by example and that kind of stuff. We clothe the naked and feed the hungry and so on and so forth. And by doing so, we show our love for them, our love for one another. Going out and missionizing, we build schools and churches. We build schools to teach people so that they can make a better life for themselves, so that they can, learn to use the resources around them to
and also so that they can know
themselves.
about God.
But we teach them about Christ. That's the ulterior goal here.
That's the
is
real
to
treasure
bring
we
the
have
gospel
to
to them. Yeah, exactly. And for these the modern Catholics to sort of treat that as though it doesn't matter. I think that's actually a heresy at play within, that
it seems to be becoming one.
Achieve some footing within the church, yeah. And I even think it's I see hints of that heresy in St. Francis as well.
Right. It's a heresy that hasn't really been named yet.
Exactly. That's why I call it the heresy of the. It's kind of funny. People use the word social gospel as though it's a good thing. I treat that term as the name for this heresy.
Yeah.
The heresy that inverts the priority of salvation and justice within a society. To me, that's the heresy, and that is what the social gospel is.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that we don't have any church leaders pointing it out.
Right.
And it just
exactly.
keeps getting worse and worse.
And why, it's like, how could they? I mean, okay, they could.
What are you saying?
If
It's
they were
wrong to
willing
feed
unpack
people, and it's wrong.
Exactly.
To do,
Okay, wait a minute. Oh, come on. It's almost like a it's almost like a feminine logic thing. Feminine logic is that logic it's wrong in its conclusion, but somehow it's constructed in a way that you can't argue with it.
Right.
It's kind of like that. I don't know. Maybe we could, maybe we could relate it to the feminist heresy. I don't know. Although feminism is actually a rejection of femininity, so it doesn't work there either.
I think we've said everything we need to say about it. Unless you got more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except, we didn't really come out and say that okay, we do have some responsibility to exercise a level of stewardship and conservation of our environment. We have a responsibility to work to make sure that the future and hopefully increasing numbers of generations of humans continue to have and to be able to use that which we have and that we're using. Okay, that's, of course we have that responsibility. And the fact that we have that responsibility is often what makes it so difficult to challenge the weird claims and the weird suggestions of environmentalists today. Right.
And there's also the beauty of nature. Aside from its use, there's the appreciation of it and the experience of it is something that obviously should be guarded, but it doesn't have to be exactly the way it was originally created, because it was originally created as the earth itself was created
as
for
a dynamic
us to inhabit.
Process. Yeah, I mean, we've got erosion, and we've got evaporation followed by rains. We've got erosion, and then we've got building up of things, depositing of things. It was created as a dynamic process in which we get to participate, and we have the privilege of participating in God's act of creation by taking some level of control of that process.
Right. And
but at the same time, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think you're talking about things like national parks and stuff. There's some things that's just like, wow, we can't replicate that.
Yeah.
We just got to hand that to God.
And
so let's keep
just
that
guard it and
let future generations also experience that.
Yeah. And
the Red River Gorge is a good example.
Right. I'm starting to look forward to that again.
In fact, I think, I know we need to start planning that for this year. But I even think of I know that it's not quite as expansive and quite as deep, but I kind of think of it as the Grand Canyon of the Midwest.
Right. It's our little Grand Canyon. It's
yeah. But it's a life-filled Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon's mostly desert.
Yeah.
Whereas the Red River Gorge, I mean,
lush.
It's magnificent, but it's also lush. Exactly.
Yeah. And the thing is that these areas like that, they are ever changing even without our intervention.
Well, that's true.
They change on their own. So it's like, well, is it better that nature changes it than us changing it? Or better nature changes it than us preserving it? How do you decide what's best for this area? Is it because, you know what I mean? Why is it better for nature to turn this into a desert than for us to turn it into a lake?
Exactly.
So.
Right.
Okay.
And the only reason would be that a particular area somehow speaks to the heart in a way that kind of glorifies God. Okay, then we say, all right, we're going to let nature keep doing what it's doing and set this aside. Those are our national parks.
Right.
And yeah, sure, it's certainly appropriate to do that. All right, so
I think we're good.
What about some current events?
Okay, current event. I didn't go through all the current events and pick out, because there's a couple big ones that stick out.
Okay.
We've got Trump announces his candidacy, and that was huge. I think like 100,000 people were trying to get in, or maybe it was 120,000. They filled the stadium, and then there were thousands outside. It was huge.
Yeah.
This happened down in Florida. So he announces, and I think within the first 24 hours, he's raised, $24 million? More than's ever been done by the Democrats. More than ever's been done before. And you remember, before he even announced, he had raised more money than all the Democrats put together, and the average donation was like $10.
It shows he's got a groundswell of support of people who are just refreshed.
Right.
It's kind of funny. I was reading. I'm going to break in here. Because the sense of being refreshed by Trump. Okay, I mean, he's got a sort of crudeness about him that may feel like, well, how could you say refreshed? Okay, whatever. But it's kind of funny. I was reading an article, and I forget where I even read it, and they were pointing out that a particular magazine, the author of the article was saying that he goes and like reads the various liberal screeds and stuff that come out, and a particular magazine. So Trump was elected, and right when he first got elected, in this particular liberal magazine's editorial view, the main sin or problem with Trump was that he had no experience as an elected official.
Oh, well.
Okay. Well, actually, that's a big part of his strength, we think. However, when I don't know how you actually say the name, Marson or whatever in France was elected. Well, he didn't have much political experience either. But in the same magazine that called out Trump for not having any experience as an elected official, they praised him as, being able to, because he was a liberal, make his, they praised him for being kind of a political outsider and being able to become the prime minister or whatever he was without, with like the least political background or whatever. In other words, the very same facts about two different people was on the one hand vilified, on the other hand praised by this liberal rag, because the one was liberal and the other was conservative. So it's like, yeah, okay, maybe he comes off a little bit crude and that kind of stuff, which means he has not had the polish of a lifetime politician. You bet that's refreshing to people.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, all the people that all they can afford is $10, but they're lining up. Yeah, here it is. Take my $10. Go get elected again.
Okay, I'm going to read you a couple quotes that describe one of our presidents.
One of our presidents in the past?
Yeah. A barbarian, Scythian, Yahoo, or gorilla. An idiot. One man called him the original gorilla. If he is reelected, I shall immediately leave the country for the Fiji Islands.
You know who people used to talk in those kinds of terms about was Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, well, that's who all these are about. is universally
Seriously?
an admitted failure, has no will, no courage, no executive capacity, and his spirit necessarily infuses itself downward through all the departments.
And his is the memorial that's right on the other side of the reflecting pond from
Right.
the Capitol building.
Yeah. I would rather be a dead man as president, thus abused in the house of my... I'm sorry, that was from... that was his wife talking about how much everyone hates him.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But all the things I hear them saying about Trump are the same kinds of things that were said about Lincoln.
It's like so many echoes of Lincoln, isn't it? And the whole parallel with slavery and abortion.
Yeah.
And how effective Trump has been.
It's almost scary.
But you know what's scary is that, okay, things were a lot more lax in terms of security back then, but, there's going to be people who are going to be out there trying to assassinate Trump.
Yeah.
If he gets elected again. I mean, his Secret Service has got to be on their game.
Especially with how friendly he is with the people.
Mm-hmm.
And how much he wants to be a part of them and let them be a part of him.
Because he's a real person. It's because he's a person instead of a politician.
Right. Speaking of Trump, so I guess Iran shoots down a drone, an unmanned drone worth $100 million. Now, President Trump's pretty ticked off about it. And he says they made
Was it an attack drone or
mistake.
just surveillance?
I don't even know.
Yeah, it probably doesn't matter.
But it was over international waters, and Iran shot it down.
Not over Iran airspace.
Right.
Okay, didn't realize that. That's a big difference.
Okay, so...
Trump's
Trump's ticked
guys,
off
pay
about
for
it. And he says they made a big mistake. And he kept saying that, and so we're all thinking, wow, he's gonna press the button on this one. And then at the very end of the little press thing he was doing, he said, I don't know, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the wrong person was in the wrong chair at the wrong time, and maybe it's just a mistake. We're going to find out. And then he announces that he's going to hit, I guess there were like 3 places he was going to hit that night. Now, that night, everybody's saying he's a warmonger. At the last minute, he changes his mind. Okay. And he tweets out, he says, look, I asked the generals how many people are going to die. They said 150. He said, well, it's not proportional. They shot down a drone and...
Oh, they didn't kill people. They didn't launch an attack against people.
Right.
Okay.
So he called it off at the last minute. Now he's a wuss.
So he was going to attack military installations, and then he found out he said, okay, wait a minute, what are we talking about in terms of loss of life? He actually used the word proportional.
Yeah, it was in the tweet. He explained to.
I mean, that's a Catholic concept when it comes to stuff like this.
Right, and look, it's my opinion that he never planned to hit those places.
Possibly not.
I think he wanted to see. I think he wanted to see what people would leak. I think he wanted to see what would leak.
Oh.
I think he's shoring up the leaks because one of the things he said during his candidacy is he was talking about the way Obama handled certain things, and he said, look, if I were going to attack such and such, I wouldn't tell you about it.
Well, sure.
I'm not going to tell the press every time I'm going to launch an attack. I have a feeling that he was looking for activity around the targets to see who he could trust, and if he said, we're going to hit these targets, what happens at those targets? I think that whole thing has been a farce. I think...
Could be, and you know what? What if he actually had different targets in mind, and internally he was saying different targets?
Right.
We would never know it.
And maybe he's still going to do it.
Something happened at those targets. Yeah. And then he gets feedback from intelligence about the targets that internally... So he tells one story to the press, a different story internally, bounding people to secrecy and looking what happens to see where his leaks are.
Right. And then
that could happen.
I mean, on top of all that, you've got two schools. Even on the the anti-Trumpers are going to criticize him no matter what he does. But
I know.
On the pro-Trump side, you've got one group of people who are saying, look, this tiny little country out there, they can't be hitting us. This has to be answered. They're not. You can't let these little countries just come in and strike when they want. On the other hand, part of his campaign was, we're going to get out of these endless wars.
Yeah.
And
that was part of his, I mean, people criticized him, but that was part of his withdrawing troops. What did he, everybody was criticizing when he was withdrawing troops from Syria. And yeah, I mean, that's true. He you know what? That's one of the things about Trump that has impressed me, is that he has tried as much as he can to be true to his campaign. His campaign wasn't like, I'm going to say one thing to get elected and then do something else.
Yeah. So he did say that he was going to not go into these endless wars and just keep bombing and because I think those kinds of wars are really all about money and people getting paid off.
Oh, right.
He wasn't going to. I don't think he's going to be a part of that. And I think part of this whole thing is that some producer of weapons or bombs goes to, and whispers in some senator's ear that's on the intelligence committee, hey, we need to sell some more bombs. Get the president to start bombing some part of the world. And then after we bomb a place, we send in contractors to do all kinds of other work. There's a lot of money in these wars.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess the short of it is, I'm willing to trust Trump's judgment on this one, and I mean, we'll see what happens. We know things have been beefed up when it concerns Iran, and he pulled us out of the agreement that Obama had made, and now he's putting sanctions. I'll bet the sanctions he puts on Iran are going to cost them more than $100 million.
Possibly, yeah. It could be that they are smart enough to see that, and they just agree to pay for the drone. That would be the best outcome.
That would be awesome. I doubt it's going to happen, but it would be cool.
They say, well, yeah, it was a mistake. We've executed the guy that was sitting in the seat. Here's your $100 million.
There is one guy who's I don't know where he's from, but he is claiming that yes, it was a mistake, and the authorities in Iran are irate at this general for hitting that drone.
For doing it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, I could imagine that. Okay.
I guess this is one of those things.
Even if they don't fork over the $100 million.
We just got to wait and see what happens.
Yeah. Right.
The one thing is that, look, we know that Trump is not a coward.
Yeah.
I mean, to make that argument is just silly.
That's true.
And I mean, he's... I don't know. I'm going to trust him on this one, and we'll see what happens in the next couple weeks.
Yep. And that's true. I mean, he's not a coward, and he's not a coward in the sense that
he's not worried about the polls.
Okay. Yeah, he's running for re-election, but he's not doing things based on whether it's going to get him elected.
Right.
And again, that goes back to that word I use, refreshing.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know. I think a lot of sophisticated people who have become never Trumpers, or even just will claim that, yeah, okay, I'll get behind Trump because he's actually moving the pieces when it comes to ending abortion, but I can't pretend to like him. Trump represents America right now. Like it or don't like it, go to the cities, and unless you're talking about the Ivy Leagues, this is what America's like. We're not polite. We're not presidential, and we never have been. America at large, we're kind of crude, and that's been part of our culture since the beginning, since George Washington. And look, Trump represents that. That's why we like him.
Right.
So, I don't know. I don't have any more news except for David Gilmour auctioned off 120 of his guitars.
120 of them?
Yeah. So
okay,
he raised.
Let me he's got 120.
David Gilmour from Pink
okay,
Floyd.
but I mean, I would think he's got like 30 or 40.
I'll bet he's got 400 or 500.
Okay, well, wow, man.
I mean,
yeah, I know who David Gilmour is.
Okay.
You know what? I would actually, if I had the money, that's one of the things I'd buy is a David Gilmour guitar.
Yeah. So, I don't know why I found that interesting. He raised $21.5 million.
Cool. Well,
yeah.
All right. Is it just for him, or is he giving the money to some stupid charity?
I don't see anything about him raising it for charity, but, well,
okay.
Hold on a second.
I'm glad, because if he was giving it to a charity, I'm sure it would be a stupid one. I mean, he's an excellent guitarist, but you know about those celebrities, they're never really bright.
Doesn't say anything in here about charities. I didn't know he needed money, but I know he's got a few albums out that I think maybe one or two good
just himself,
songs on.
non like post Pink Floyd PPF.
Yeah, he tours, but he owns the rights to, or at least he controls the rights to a lot of the Pink Floyd songs. So he'll do things like "Wish You Were Here," but then he's got a few of his own that post Pink Floyd that I don't know. I don't really care. There may be one or two that I like, but for the most part, wait a minute.
Kind of like
okay, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is Client Earth is where the monies went to. Client Earth.
Huh?
It's an environmental thing.
Oh, yeah, too bad. It's kind of funny. It fits with our podcast today.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, you know, I've got a local one.
Okay.
And this is not news from the Nation of Nonsense. This is just standard current events. But so we have here in Indianapolis a high school called Brebeuf Jesuit Preparatory School. And it has long been considered a fairly, strong Catholic private school. It's one of those that I don't know what the tuition is per year, but only rich people go there. Let me put it that way. Well, this past week, Archbishop Charles Thompson of the Archdiocese of Indianapolis has revoked their right to call themselves, put themselves out publicly as a Catholic institution.
Oh, wow.
Because they have a teacher on their staff who is in a same-sex so-called marriage. And the Archbishop, approached him and said, hey, it's not that he went and as soon as the marriage happened, it's not like he's combing and micromanaging and said, hey, you got to fire this guy and stuff like that. Right? But his contract has ended. It's up for renewal. And he said, all right, you can't renew this teacher's contract. This is if you're going to be a Catholic school.
Yeah.
Your teachers have to be exemplars of the faith that they're teaching if you're going to call your mission Catholic.
Sure.
So Brebeuf declined to heed the Archbishop's advice. They renewed the teacher's contract. They said, we're going to renew it anyway. And so the Archbishop revoked their right to call themselves a Catholic school. And of course, locally, there's a lot of, hubbub over it. And most, you go to any common secular news source, most people are, in fact, everybody pretty much is down on the Archbishop, down on the Archdiocese, in support of Brebeuf, whatever. So from our podcast, for what it's worth, I just want to say and put it out there, kudos to Archbishop Thompson, and he needs our support and our prayers. He's
exercising the whole world there.
Yeah, I mean, this is real heroism. This is a very unpopular line that he's holding, and he's holding the line.
Yeah.
So, let's all give him our prayers, and if you can find some way, whether on social media or whatever, to give him support, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, it's important.
So, all right, we
that's
do
all
have
we
a
got.
couple things from the Nation of Nonsense.
Oh, we do? Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, do you have something else?
No, I thought we were done.
Okay.
Okay.
So Nation of Nonsense. Here we are in England again. Okay, so if you have not seen it yet, stop, discontinue our podcast, put it on pause, and go find and watch a copy of The Birds.
I guess
Alfred
we'll
Hitchcock.
link to it.
The Birds.
What?
What's that?
We're gonna... You want people to stop and watch The Birds?
If they have not seen it yet.
Oh,
Anybody
okay.
who has not seen Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, I'm assuming everybody's seen it. I mean, that's such a classic movie. But if you
Yeah.
have not, stop, go watch The Birds, then come back to this podcast. So, according to Fox News, an English couple said they were unable to leave their house for nearly a week because seagulls tried to attack them every time they left.
You're kidding me.
This is an old couple in Knott End on the Sea in Lancashire, and seagulls would chase them whenever they tried to go outside.
Just them or everyone?
Just them.
That's so weird.
They said, thankfully, we have an integrated garage. I can go into it from the kitchen, open the door, and drive out to go shopping. But if I have to leave the garage door open, that's not ideal. A spokesperson for the local government told the news outlet that the gulls are protected while they nest. And while they sympathize with the Packard situation, they can't really do anything about the birds.
Wait a minute. I don't understand.
This ties into our podcast.
Are they is their home built on like a nesting site or something? Why are they attacking
No, I don't.
them?
It doesn't say.
It just says that they're being
Says
attacked.
that- it says-
constantly. Huh.
The two adult birds are right there, and I've got no chance. It's genuinely frightening.
It's not like a group of 500 of them. It's two specific
No.
birds.
It's just when they open it, these two seagulls, or this pair of seagulls, like dive bomb and attack these people every time they go out.
Okay.
Now, okay, I will say this. The couple, it's an older couple. The man is 77, the wife is 71.
They smell like old people.
Well, I was going to say the birds might just be kind of like standing there and kind of squawking at them real mean and stuff like
Maybe they
that.
got
Not
scared.
necessarily. The concept of attacking, it could be different for them than it is for us. So, like when I think attack, it's like, okay, if a bird's going to squawk at me, I'm not going to even worry about it unless it actually flies and tries to like peck at me or something like that.
Right.
So I don't know. It could be that the birds are just squawking.
You
at
walk
them.
through Blue Ash, those geese run after you and rah, 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 and they'll sit there. They don't actually come up and bite you though.
Well, I was going to say that, because this kind of reminded me of something. This could also kind of be part of my nonsense news, but it's personal. So I work in a sort of one of those business office parks kind of a thing, and where they've got a few buildings, and then they've got landscaping and some areas of grass. Well, and they've got a couple of ponds there, but the thing is, it's not even close to the pond, but there's this grassy area where I first go in, where the geese like to hang out.
Yeah.
And they've just had their young, and so there's a lot of like very young geese along with some older geese there. One of those days, and I don't know what it was that caused this to happen, but one of those days while I was driving in, one of the older geese started rushing at my car with this angry, I mean, like it was going to attack my car.
Yeah.
It's like, really?
Go ahead, dude.
Do what you think you can. I don't know.
Yeah. I get them rushing at me all the time.
I guess, if they actually did attack the car and then they ended up getting like crushed under your tires, I think there's probably some kind of fine that you'd have to pay or something. I don't know. It's just stupid.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Despite the fact that they're everywhere, they're protected.
Yeah.
I think those are Canadian geese.
Those are they're protect. I mean, in spite of the fact that they're like, it's like I don't know. You can't go anywhere without finding them. And
they're
yet,
everywhere.
For some reason, they're protected.
And they poop all over the parking lots. And it's gross.
They do. It's awful. So anyway. All right, second one. There was a woman who was released from a Missouri jail, and she's released from jail. Now I've had one of my kids who was in jail, and when I went to pick him up, it's like they said go park there, and it's like this kind of like, out. It's like, am I even in the right place? It's out of the way. This like just surrounded by chain link fence kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And there's this like bare door, very obtrusive. There's the side of the building, this bare door, and it's like they open the door, let him out, close the door, and that's it. And then he walks out and he can get my car.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they didn't even do this much for this woman. They didn't even escort her to the bare door to let her leave the jail. And this is in St. Louis. They processed her out, and from the desk told her the directions out of the building. You go here, you go there, go through this door. Okay. So she took a wrong turn, and she got into this area of the building that was... She couldn't get outside. All the doors to the outside were locked, and she couldn't get outside. But then once she had gone through the door, she also couldn't get back into the main building. It was like some kind of a fire escape stair or something like that. I don't know what, I don't know why she couldn't get outside, but she couldn't get back in. She was trapped in there for 2.5 days.
Wow. I can see that.
In the jail building.
Yeah, because I have to go to places like that to fix machines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like you need a card to get through this area, and then you need a card to get out. I've gotten locked in the bathroom. Well, I was locked in the bathroom for like 45 minutes because somebody let me into the bathroom, and then I couldn't get out of the bathroom. And the
door wouldn't open.
Right. To open certain doors, you need certain cards.
It's like you're like, you just go pound on the door every few minutes or whatever and hope somebody hears you. Or it's like, come on, guys, don't you ever have to pee?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
So anyway, that happened to me almost, not quite as bad as you, but I was at GM. Was it GM? No, it was Chrysler. When I was working up in Michigan, and I had to go into the Chrysler production plant. Now they're very, very serious about the possibility of information walking out of their building that might be taken, So I got in, and it turned out that the guy that I was there to meet was a new guy, and he had not yet been given the security codes to allow him to to go out of the building. So his badge wouldn't work to get me out of the building. I'm like stuck there. And it's like, and I was kind of a jerk about it. They have, these cubicle farms, and it's like, well, who can we call? It's like,
there's a whole sea of people
I'd
over
pick
there.
up the phone, and I would like talk on the phone, and I would talk kind of loud because people, there's this kind of etiquette in cubicle farms. When you're on the phone, you have to talk quiet, which is kind of, I hate being on the phone with somebody who's in that situation because I have to ask them to speak up, and they don't want to do it because, they're out in a cubicle. So I was talking loud and asking, hey, can you get me out of here? Who can get me, it's that kind of stuff. Because I also had other stuff going on. I was like only supposed to be there in the morning, and then for the afternoon I was taken off, and I had a timeline I had to be on. And there's people saying, hey, can you keep it down? It's like, if you can let me out of the building,
here and I'll be
down.
quiet.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but it's kind of, that stuff does happen. So,
I went into one place and worked on a machine, and every now and then someone would stop by. Well, how's it going? Is it fixed yet? And then people stopped coming. And I wrapped everything up, and I get my tool bag, and I start looking around. And finally, I find my way out of the building, but the gates are all locked with padlocks.
Oh.
I couldn't get my car out.
Of the parking lot.
Yeah, I was trapped.
Oh, man.
I called and searched, and I was getting ready to call the cops. Finally, I found one guy who was still inside there. And He had to call
And he
like
knew how
5 different people to get me out.
to find out
it
what
was
guard
terrible.
could.
Yeah.
Well, how was he going to get out?
I don't know. It was like he was going to spend the night. He
You know,
parked on the
I
outside.
understand these things, but
He parked on the outside of those gates.
oh, okay. You know, people should tell you that when you go there. Hey, don't go in the parking lot, or you'll get trapped.
Or, you know, I don't know. We're leaving at 5. If you still here, then you might get trapped. So come on out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty mad.
So apparently, this woman, you know, she finally made it when somebody noticed her in one of the windows of one of the doors. But she was making noises, but people couldn't figure out where the noises were coming from because she kept she would move from floor to floor.
Yeah. Banging on doors, bang on this door, bang on that door.
So, okay, here's a lesson for anybody who gets into that situation. Stay in one place.
Yeah, just bang on one door.
Yeah. All right, so final thing, one more from the Nation of Nonsense. That this is just funny. I don't actually have the text of it, but you'll have to put maybe, I don't know, a link to the Fox News story. So it's because it's a video story. It doesn't actually have the text, but apparently the title, the headlines, "Kids are growing horns from too much phone use."
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
So this doctor is on talking about how, from the way they hold their phones against their head, I guess it's causing, and it's not a horn in the sense of the top of the head, but in the back, behind the mastoid process, kind of like behind the ear, they're tending to grow this like extra little little spur of bone downward that it's like growing out of their head.
Yeah. Does this guy have proof of this?
He says, Fox News medical contributor Dr. Mark Siegel on how cell phone use is physically changing us. I don't know.
Does he have like X-rays that we can look at?
There's X-rays. Yeah.
Okay.
No, there's X-rays in the video. So
I'll have to look at that. I heard about that. I was kind of like, whatever.
Yeah, really? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't believe it.
Well, I saw it and I thought, okay, I thought it was going to be like a humor piece or something like that. Like, you say, kids are growing horns from too much phone use, and I thought they were going to be like, I thought that was like metaphorical, like kids are, you know, turning into like the devil or something like that, like their parents don't know what to do with them. But no, he's talking about literally, and he's got
thing
this.
Is, kids don't walk
X-ray.
around all day listening to using their cell phones. They use them to text, not talk.
Well, that's the thing. And I wonder if it's not cell phones, but like headphones and earbuds or something.
Yeah, I don't believe it. I'm gonna have to. I'll look. Well, you've got the link. I'll look at it.
You know,
we'll link.
I'll
to
send
it.
you the link. I'll send you the link, and if one of us gets time to actually research it and debunk it, we'll bring it back up in a future podcast.
Yeah.
Because I've always kind of been a friend of cell phones. It's like, you know,
right.
You get the whole internet, especially modern cell phones, in your pocket.
Right. It's amazing.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that's all I've got.
Up. All right. Well, think about what we said and circle the beads.
Circle the beads, everyone.
And we will see you next week.
All right. Bye, everyone.